Welcome everyone to another consumer search seminar. Kinshuk, you have 50 minutes. Take it away.
Thank you very much, Dan and Simon and Maxime for organizing this and giving me the opportunity to present here. And hello, everybody. Good morning. Well, I'm not sure if there's any morning people, maybe somebody from California or somewhere, but otherwise, good afternoon, good evening to all of you, wherever you are. The work that I'm going to present today is titled Consumer Search Under Product Returns. This is joint work that I have with the PhD student who was here at Columbia and now is at City University of Hong Kong at Shenzhen. He's a professor there now. Just to set expectations, I was actually supposed to present a different paper, it was in that paper we use a rational inattention framework to look at when consumers have the opportunity to search for favorable or unfavorable information for products. What would they do? What should they do? And what should the firm do in terms of information design in that setting? And now, sometime back, happily, that paper got accepted. So then I didn't want to present that. So then I wrote to Dan and he said that, well, if you have something else, I said that I do have something else, but which is very early. But I think there is some good stuff here. And he and Simon and Maxime encouraged me to present. So on the one hand, this is a little underbaked. On the other hand, I do think there's some interesting things here going on. And definitely the feedback will be very useful for me. Okay, so I'm going to talk about consumer search. Everybody here knows about it. So in most purchasing scenarios, right, consumers can search some information about a product before purchasing it to determine, at least to some degree, if it's a match or not. So here I have a screenshot. So I have a 7-year-old who's doing school from home, and half the time he's actually not doing school from home. He has a computer and he's playing video games. But he asked me some time back what was my favorite video game when I was a kid, and I told him it was Super Mario. So he got to playing Super Mario. He finished the game in like 3 days. And then he found out on his own on Amazon this thing, Super Mario Maker 2, where you can customize your own Mario game. And he wanted to get that. And I realized that he had read all about it, and he really does think that it's a good match for him. And so with most places, you can find such information. And at least to some degree or to a good degree, you can understand, yes, it's a match, I should get it or I should not get it. Right? But so keeping this in mind, one think of something like a retailer like Warby Parker. Right? So Warby Parker is, did I miss one? No. So Warby Parker is, I don't know how popular it is in Europe, but here in the US, it's actually an online seller of eyeglasses, right? And obviously it's very difficult to determine match for eyeglasses in the online space when you're buying them online. So this company has a number of different programs, and one of the very interesting ones is this home try-on program. And the home try-on program says that, look, you go to our website, you choose 5 frames. We will send you those 5 frames with plain glass lenses in them for 5 days, 100% free. You can wear them, you can show them to your friends, get the feedback, figure out your match, and then decide if you want to purchase one of these. You send all of these 5 back, then whatever you want to purchase, well, you purchase, and we'll ship you that with the correct glasses in them, with the lenses. So what's interesting here is that Warby Parker is trying very hard to enable the consumer to determine match to a high degree before purchase, right? Contrast that with Zappos. And what they're doing is, which is a shoe retailer, and I'm sure people have heard of that. It was purchased by Amazon several years, about a decade ago. What they want to do, they say is that, look, just get the shoe, okay? Don't worry about it. And you have basically a no questions asked and a very liberal return policy, right? So they want you to determine the match after purchase. So again, here it's before purchase and really trying hard to get that done. Here it's after purchase. And that brings us to the point of return policies, that return policies actually vary quite substantially across stores. So Warby Parker also has a return policy actually, but and it's a good one, but it's almost like the return rate on Warby Parker glasses is not that high. I mean, its return rate on Zappos shoes is very, very high. So here's an article which is stores with the best and the worst return policies. The return policies vary quite substantially across stores. Um, in one is whether returns are allowed or not, right? So most retailers allow it, not all of them. Some dollar stores and cheaper stores don't allow returns. Then another thing is that what is the fee you want to do? Is it free? Is it a small fee? Is it a large fee? And then there is one thing which I call the complexity of a return contract, which is things like, oh, you need the receipt, and maybe you also need original packaging. Maybe you also need the product should be completely unused and as new, and you should return it within 30 days, and you drop it off here, right? So you can make it more and more complex, which is also that varies actually. That is the most in that is where we see the most variation across different sellers, like what are the clauses associated with the return policy. So I find that interesting. And really, coming from a sort of I'm in a business school and coming from this management marketing point of view, the question I have is that what makes these things vary? I mean, it's not surprising that they vary across retailers. Like, what are some of the basic factors that make things vary, and what are returns really doing, and so forth. One would. So it is indeed natural to study consumer search and product returns together, because consumers return products that don't find a match, and search helps consumers to obtain match information before purchasing. So these two are quite interconnected. One would think that this question actually has been solved in the literature, but frankly, I did quite a bit of search and I couldn't find much except for one thing. So it seems that somehow this has escaped much attention. And actually, during the talk, if somebody thinks of something that I don't know about but exists, I would really like to hear about that too. And so basically that's the motivation, and firms can set price and return policy, and to some degree the informativeness of search. Maybe they can design the web page differently. Maybe they can give more what information to actually put on the web page, how easy or difficult to make it for consumers to search. Right. So Warby Parker's home brand program is indeed, I think you can think of it as lowering search cost, or think of it as increasing search informativeness. Right. And based on all of this, consumers will have different search, purchase, and return behaviors. So that's what I want to explore. So basically understand the interactions between consumer search and product returns. And today I'll just stick to a monopolist framework. So how does a monopolist set price, return policy, and search informativeness to the extent possible to maximize its profit, and what consumer behaviors is this going to induce? Right? So that's sort of the larger motivating question. So the approach is we make a very simple model. The monopolist seller who sets price and sets return policy, and a consumer who decides whether to search and purchase and return. And some of the key results we find is that one, we are able to show that look, by setting the price and the return policy under different conditions, which mainly depend on the search cost and salvage value and some other things, we basically do see very different consumer behaviors. So we see the case of no search but purchase and return for free, right, which I call the Zappos case. We see the case of don't search and buy and returns are not allowed, which is like Dollar General, which is a dollar store, that they don't allow returns. We see the case of search, buy only if you on match, and then you won't need the return, and the return policy is basically irrelevant. That's essentially Warby Parker. And then obviously the case of search, and then you buy if you find a match, or even if the search is inconclusive, the search could return no results, right? It's just like, doesn't give me any new information. So I'm just back to my prior, but I still decide to purchase, right? That can happen also. But then the return has a fee associated with it. And you can return if there is no match after purchase, right? So this is, I would say, most retailers with the return fee varying across retailers. And then another one, and sort of a higher level. So this is sort of, where I started that, oh, why do these things vary? And we're able to explain them. And I think it's not surprising that we see all of these different outcomes, but what is interesting, I find, is that the results make a lot of sense to me that, oh yeah, in this case, yeah, this does make a lot of sense that this is what the firm does. And then there are also at a higher level, what are returns really doing? Well, returns are helping the firm to appropriate some of the surplus that the consumer obtains through search. So that's also, that's also fine. But what is interesting is also that the firm's optimal return policy is too liberal, right? It's sort of a very good policy compared to what would lead to efficient allocation of the product. Efficient allocation being that if the product, whoever in the end has the best match, highest match value with the product, it could be the consumer or it could be the firm, and the consumer could be under match or not a match, right? One could set a return policy to achieve that. If we take that as a benchmark, then the return policy we see here for that is optimal for the firm is too liberal. And I think that also, I think generally there is a feeling that return policies are very liberal, right? You just get like a full refund and so on. And this tends to explain that. So these are sort of the high level results. And
can I ask a clarifying question?
yeah.
So there's almost like two tiers of search going on. Thinking like with Warby Parker, there's like the first level, which is what you could tell without getting your hands on these items. And
Right.
the other level is what you can tell once it's delivered to your door. Are you going to
Right.
think about these separately? So with Warby Parker, that difference might not be that important, but with something like the fourth bullet point of the kind of conventional retailer, it is, right?
Yeah. So what we assume is that once you get the product, your match is revealed perfectly, right? And so before purchasing, you could search and that could reveal the match perfectly, or it could just fail, right? Search could be inconclusive.
So it wouldn't then be, though, you observe one of two components that's additive or something like that.
No, it's just like yeah, there's a match or not a match, basically.
Perfect. Okay, thank you.
But I would definitely, welcome suggestions for sort of how to improve this model or change this model further. Okay. So if you look at the literature, there's a large literature, obviously on search, not even going to get into that, but there's a literature on return policies. Very surprisingly to me, this literature does not consider search. And I think these are like closely related. I know maybe the problem is not that interesting or what I think it is, but I mean, there's absolutely nothing out there except for one paper, which is a working paper, so from 2007. So I guess it's a non-working paper now, because it hasn't been published yet and hasn't been updated in like 14 years. So this paper, is by Matthews and Persico, and our approach is different from this paper in various ways. So one of the main ways in which we're different is that Matthews and Persico look at extreme contracts, right? So they look at basically what would map to in our setting as a no return or a full refund. And in our case, we solve for the general arbitrary contract given our model where returns actually could be partial. You could have a partial refund and we don't consider that. Another one is that we say that, look, you could search and the search could be inconclusive. They have that if somebody searches, they figure out their valuation perfectly, right? And so in that case, in what I have, there are various things that come up, behaviors like you search, but you don't find anything, but you still buy. In their framework, that cannot happen. And also we model something which I'll call complexity of the contract. I sort of spoke about it a little bit. Sorry, there's something troubling my eye, so if that's throwing you off, I'm sorry about that. I model something called complexity of return policy, which is, sort of how many clauses do you want to add, does the firm want to add to the return policy to make it more and more, let's say, difficult for the consumer to be able to return, and they don't have that. So there are certainly differences. Then there's a large literature actually on supply chain return policies and reverse logistics. So this is related to that, but not a whole lot. And then there's obviously literature on preventing or encouraging information acquisition by consumers, and also how much information a seller should provide buyers. So obviously related to that literature. Okay, so let me get to the model.
Can I ask you a question, or it's
Yes,
almost a
please.
suggestion? So
Yeah.
there are a couple of papers. Alexei Parachoniak has one. I think
Mhm.
Martin has one where they look at consumer search with recall or without with costly recall. So this recall does not refer to recalling the product. It refers
Yeah.
to whether you can go back, kind of return in the search process.
Right.
I would
Mhm.
imagine there are some modeling connections between the two, because somehow, there's a cost associated with going back in your kind of search progression.
Right.
I
Mhm.
would imagine that there is some connection, but let's see.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. I'll take note of that. So, all right. So going to the model, right? So it's a very simple model actually. There's one consumer who buys at most 1 unit of a product, and there's a price of the product which is P, and the price is observed by the consumer. Okay. So the problem is the match. Yes. The match. But I'm getting some. If you can hear that, I'm getting some text messages which are chiming on my laptop. The consumer is uncertain about their match with the product. And if there is a match, the consumption utility is 1. If there is no match, the consumption utility is W, which is between 0 and 1. So we assume that if you buy a product and you don't like it, at least it doesn't hurt you. Um, so modular price. And the probability that a product is a match is Q, and this is shared as a prior by the consumer and by the firm. And after the purchase, the match is fully resolved. All right. Now, the firm may offer a return policy, and we denote this by theta equal to 1. Theta is a parameter that the firm sets or not, and we denote that by theta equal to 0. Now, if the return policy is offered, then if the consumer purchases and does not find a match, they can return the product by paying a fee gamma, and losing gamma is better than getting W and losing the price. And also you can think of the return fee of gamma as a refund of P minus gamma. So they're equivalent. Now I want to point out here that a lot of the previous literature models some sort of a hassle cost in return, that the consumer incurs some sort of, just like incur a cost in search, right? You incur a cost just sort of which is just dissipates in returning the product. So we don't model that. We have it like in the early version, but this plays a role sort of very similar to the return fee and doesn't really add much to the insight. So we just sort of assume that away. But later I do model the complexity of a return policy, which again I'll talk about. Now, the salvage value to the firm of the return product is S, which is less than the valuation of the consumer on match, and this can also be negative. So the firm gets the product back, and they just have to spend more on it and that turns out to be negative. All right. So before purchasing, the consumer can search the product information to reduce uncertainty about product match. The cost of the search is C greater than 0. And then we say that with probability delta, the search is successful and resolves product match. And with probability 1 minus delta, the search is unsuccessful and you just go back to your prior. And if there is a match, if the search is successful, then the consumer will find that the product is a match with the correct probability, which is Q. And with 1 minus Q, figure out that it's not a match. So very simple model. The timeline is that the firm decides the price and whether it allows the return, and also it sets the return fee if it allows returns. The consumer decides whether to search or not. And if the consumer searches, then the resolve match if search is successful, or they get no new information if search is unsuccessful. Based on that, they decide whether to purchase or not. And the outside option is normalized to 0. And if the consumer purchases, they decide to return the product or not return the product after they get it. And if they don't find a match, they want to return it if returns are allowed.
Sorry, can I ask you a clarifying question?
Yeah.
Why do you need this distinction between whether search is successful and whether the match is good? So somehow one would usually have the second but not the first. What does the difference between the two mean? Or am I understanding what you just said?
Search is successful, it can also tell you that the product doesn't match, right?
Right. So, but if search is unsuccessful, you don't know whether it's a match or not.
Yes. You go back to the
make
product.
this distinction. Why don't you just have you search, there's a match or there's no match, and end of story?
So there's three outcomes, right? Either you can learn it's bad, you can learn it's good, or you learn nothing. But is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So Sandra, there's three possible outcomes from this.
So I get that. So, but so you need all these three outcomes. Why do you need a third one?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think you're right there that, I think it's you once you have the cost. Yeah, so the delta, the informativeness actually doesn't play a role very different from cost, right? So yeah, one could say that delta is a bit of a superfluous parameter, but I think it's more for just making it a little more realistic, saying that look, you could do the search and you could not, the search returns nothing.
And you need something like this, though, because there needs to be some reason to buy and then possibly learn, or some way to buy and
right. I mean, so then that allows that you did the search, you spend the cost, you didn't learn anything, but you still bought it. So that outcome now, I think, yeah, I mean, but so that outcome wouldn't happen if this were not the case, right? But it is also true that whatever role delta plays is kind of the opposite role of search cost C, finally. So, I mean, I'm actually, one thing I want to understand again is delta playing any role beyond search cost? I mean, so can we just think of it as delta by C? Like, what is the informativeness per unit search cost? Or what is the search cost for a given level of informativeness? And I think directionally, yeah.
So here your consumers are all identical ex ante, if I've understood correctly.
Right. There's just one.
So that, I mean, this is a way that kind of makes them interim heterogeneous.
Yeah, it does.
And that can play a role. Like, with heterogeneous consumers, then it might be that for things like refund policies, you end up just discriminating a little bit because it will attract some and it won't attract others. So I think kind of heterogeneity of consumers can do interesting things. I mean, I have an agenda in suggesting that, because we have this GEMS paper in 2012 that was exactly about how ex ante heterogeneity can lead you to use information type policies. We didn't look at refund policies specifically, but it's natural to think of refund policies as ones that act as a kind of way of discriminating in information, and leading away from the sort of extreme demand rotations of Johnson and Mayet.
Yeah.
So you might find that interesting, but then, given that this induces some interim heterogeneity, I can imagine that can serve a role.
Thanks. Yeah, let me look at that paper also of yours and get more insight into this. So, but certainly, like, sort of to summarize, if we don't have this, then there is no heterogeneity, interim heterogeneity, and frankly, I still have to wrap my head around how much of a role is this playing in this model. So I'll definitely think about that further. Okay, thank you. So benchmark one, just we set this benchmark that the return is possible, but let's say search is not possible, right? So there is a prior utility with probability. If with probability Q, I get the match, and this is what I get with probability 1 minus Q. I don't get a match. Then if theta is 1 and the policy, there is a return policy, I pay minus gamma. And if theta is 0 and there is no return policy, I pay W minus P. I incur W minus P. And the firm's problem is set the price, the theta, and the gamma such that this is the profit that you maximize. So if there is a return policy and product doesn't match, the firm makes gamma plus S. And the firm wants the consumer to buy in this case. So solving this very simple without the product return, the firm problem is induce the consumer to buy, right? And you can just set this price, basically simple. And with the product return, it's again very simple. You just basically the optimal is not one. There's sort of a continuum of optimal prices and gamma. But what is interesting is that the profit of the firm is Q plus 1 minus Q times S. So if you compare these two profits of the firm, we say that look, the firm allows product return if and only if its own salvage value is greater than sort of the salvage value of a consumer under not a match, right? And what that does is that it enables the product to be allocated to the party with the higher salvage value. So that's good, that's efficient allocation. And the firm actually appropriates all of the expected surplus from this product. And the consumer's expected surplus is actually zero, right? So this is how returns are actually helping the firm. Now,
can I ask an additional question?
Yes.
Right now, you've got not just, I mean, it's basically revealing whether this fits. And so at the end of this, we've got an expected consumer surplus of 0. Do you consider a case where it still, whether search might reveal something after purchase, you know the value fully, but now it's a continuously distributed value, and so the firm can't exactly pin down the consumer?
No, so we don't have that, right? I mean, in this model, this benchmark doesn't even have the search, right? But I think you're not talking about the benchmark. Yeah, so we don't have that. So, I mean, I think one thing would be, I would like to figure out is like, is how necessary is that, and like, should we extend the model to including something like that? So the second benchmark, very, very simple again, there is search, but there is no return. So this is the prior utility. If you don't search, then you get the maximum of the prior or 0, which is the outside option. If you search, then with probability delta, you'll get a match. Sorry, the search will be successful. And then if you get a match, you get this. If you don't get a match, you don't buy. And with probability 1 minus delta, you go back essentially to this term and basically the prior. Obviously, incur the cost C. So this is for the consumer. And the firm has to set the price and can motivate the following behaviors. So the firm can make the consumer to search and buy the product only if they find a match, right? And in that case, the firm does not want them to buy without any information, but wants them to buy with search. And in that case, this is the firm, this is the profit, the profit of the firm. The marginal cost is 0. Then the second behavior that can be induced is make the consumer search and buy the product if they find a match or if they find that the search is inconclusive, right? So there, it's if they find a match, if search is successful, then this. If search is not successful, then the consumer buys anyway, because that's what the firm sets. The firm sets a prior to this, but still the consumer does want to search. And the third is that the consumer doesn't search and just buys the product. So this again, this is a very standard search setting. And then you have the following, that it depends on search cost what happens. For low search cost, the firm induces the consumer to search and buy only on match. Then a little bit higher, the firm induces the consumer to search and buy on match, or if a search is inconclusive. Further, the firm induces the consumer to not search and buy at this price. And if the search cost is even higher, then the firm induces the consumer to not search and buy at sort of this higher price. This price is lower than this price. All right, so this is what it is. I think this is one thing that I want to point out. One is that search is increasing consumer surplus here. Is leading to some positive consumer surplus. And the firm actually would like, all else equal, the firm would want a very high search cost. And that's best for the firm. The consumer doesn't search. Now we get to the main model, which has both search and return. So just to remind you, theta can be 0 or 1, which is no return or return. So the prior utility is it looks like this, right? So this is the same as the case of return, actually, that if with probability Q, I'm going to buy, it'll be a match, sorry, with probability 1 minus Q. If returns are available, then I'll return it, and if returns are not available, then I'll incur this. And obviously, you want to make the return attractive to the consumer in the case of not a match. The utility of not searching is the same, and utility of searching is also that with probability delta, the search is successful, in which case with probability Q, it matches and I get this. Otherwise, the search is unsuccessful. I just go back to this. There should be an E here. So the firm has to set the price, the theta, and the gamma. And here the firm can induce similar behaviors, but little bit extra compared to the previous case. One is that you can induce the consumer to search and buy the product only if they find a match, and then there will be no return, and because they have bought only on a match, right? So the return policy is basically not relevant. I mean, you have to set something there so that the prior is still 0, but the return policy is not very relevant in this case. The other is that they induce the consumer to search and buy the product even if they find a match, or if the search is inconclusive. Obviously, they won't buy if there is no match. And then the consumer returns under no match if the firm allows the return. So the firm can also choose whether to allow the return or not allow the return. So there's really two split behaviors here. And then there's the induce the consumer to not search and buy the product, and the consumer returns under no match if the firm allows return. The firm here also could allow or not allow returns. So when we solve this, what do we get? One is that in the case of high salvage value, right? If salvage value is high relative to search cost, then the firm can charge the highest price possible, which is 1, but allow product returns without a fee. Okay, and then induce the consumer to buy without search. And this is basically the Zappos case. Right? This is what Zappos is doing, and one could imagine that yes, the salvage value on shoes is, unused shoes is pretty high, and cost of search is not so small. So that's one kind of insight that at least this was what was motivating me, that why the different dealers do different things, and kind of getting towards that. Second is that the salvage value is low, but the search cost is high. In this case, the firm can charge a very low price or a low price. So this price is lower than this one. It can charge sort of a price on the lower end and induce the consumer to buy without search and not allow product returns. And this is basically what dollar stores are doing, right? I'll price low, you just get it, and don't search, don't bother, just get it, but you can't return it because the price is already low. Then there can be another case, which is there is a very low, or think of it as a large negative salvage value and a low search cost, right? And in this case, the firm will charge a not too low price and induce the consumer to search, but buy only if there's a match. And then the return policy is really irrelevant. And so this happens when the salvage value is very large negative. And this is basically what Warby Parker is doing, right? That the price is not very low, but you should search and buy only if there's a match, right? And the return policy is kind of not even used. And Warby Parker is kind of like that. I mean, it's glasses, right? So once you make the lenses and all, and then you get them back, it's negative salvage value probably. And also they are making search very easy through this home try on thing, reducing the cost, you could say, or increasing the informativeness. And the returns, they have a return policy, but it is known that Warby Parker's return rates are kind of on the lower end. All right. Then we come to other cases where the firm induces the consumer to search and buy if there is a match or if search is inconclusive, right? So you did search, but you found nothing. You're like, okay, I'm going to still buy, right? So you obviously need to set the price accordingly, but also give a return policy which charges some moderate fee for returning. Okay, so that's a behavior you motivate, which I would say is most retailers with different kinds of fee. Okay. And another thing that happens here is for certain other like small salvage value and mediocre medium salvage search cost, the firm charges a low price, induces the consumer to search and buy if there's a match, or if it searches inconclusive but does not allow returns. And one could argue that this is also dollar store. So previously the Dollar General case had said was that you buy if you don't search and you still buy. But here it's just sort of extending that to say that you search, it could be inconclusive, but you still buy because the price is pretty low and there are no returns allowed, and you know that up front, but you still buy. So I mean, I've given you a lot of different results. Here is a stylized outcome plot, and these lines, this is stylized. So these lines are certainly not straight, right? But I'm just sort of just to give you an idea of what's happening. So if you, let's go up this vertical axis. Let me just take a look at the time. Okay. So we have 10 minutes, right? 10, 11 minutes. Yeah. So let's go up this vertical axis. And this is the salvage value. So if salvage value is high, you charge, this is Zappos, you charge a high price, free returns, consumers don't search. If salvage value is very low, this is Warby Parker, not too low price, search but buy only on match, and the return policies basically becomes irrelevant because you buy only on match. Now, if the search, now let's look at medium salvage values, which could be negative also, but not very negative, and positive, but not very positive. In this case, the outcome is that the firm charges a not too low price, and there is a moderate return fee, and the consumers can search and buy on match, or in case the search is inconclusive, which I would say again is most retailers. But then as search cost is increasing, you charge a lower price, you offer no returns, and consumers could buy without search or on search, but even if search is inconclusive, right? So the sort of the salvage value and the search cost are determining quite a bit, and this explains, I think, the gamut of different policies that we see there. Now, you could look a little bit into prices and so on. This is the optimal price. This doesn't cover all of these cases, of course, but for some parameter values, I'm showing is that if search cost is low, you charge a high price, in which case consumers search and buy on match, or if search is inconclusive, but you have a return with partial refund. And if you're offering no returns, you reduce the price, and sometimes quite substantially. But here, the return fee in percentage terms is like basically no fee here when the price is high. And then if the price is low, the fee is increasing up to, like in this case, like this is obviously just one example, is like up to 30%, right? So it's like this level of return fee could be charged as a percentage. Now, if you look at profit plots, and I think this may be kind of obvious even ex ante, but I think it's good to see it. If we compare benchmark one with the main model, so benchmark one had returns but no search, and the main model has returns and search. So the difference here is really the impact of consumers being able to search, and that reduces the firm's profit and actually increases consumer surplus. So that's fine. So search advantages the consumer. Now, if you compare benchmark 2, which is no returns but search, with the main model, which is returns and search, so that gives the impact of the return policy, then the firm gets some of this profit back, right? So search is helping the consumer, and returns are in turn advantaging the firm, giving advantage to the firm. So how does that happen? Now we can dig a little bit deeper, and this is a bit of a complicated plot, but not complicated, but sort of difficult to read. The blue line is the profit under benchmark 1. The black line is profit under benchmark, the main model, and the red line is the profit under benchmark 2. And benchmark 2 is when there are search but no returns, and the main model has obviously search and returns. So I've marked these different line segments, and we'll focus here, our attention here. A1 is the region of the main model where the consumers search and buy on match and on unsuccessful search, and they can return, right? So the return policy is definitely active here. And B1, B2, and B3 are the following. So B1 is under benchmark 2 when there are no returns but they search, and consumers do search and buy only on match, right here. In this little part here, which is kind of flat, basically, consumers search and buy on match or on unsuccessful search, and in B3 they buy without search, right? So this is the behavior sort of under the optimal equilibrium. And if we compare A1 with B1, the return policy is increasing sales because it's making the consumer buy on unsuccessful search when they otherwise would not have bought, because they can return if it doesn't match. If you compare A1 with this B2, the return policy allows the firm to charge a higher price, and that's how the firm is helping. If you compare A1 with B3, the return policy is actually leading to more consumer search, right? So in B3, this region in the model with only search and no return, consumer wasn't searching, but here the firm is making the consumer search. And so even the search sort of hurts the firm as such, but a return policy can make the consumer search more. So this is just saying the same thing, really, that without the return policy, the firm has only price to influence the consumer's search decision, but with the return policy, the firm can also use the price and the return fee. And the benefit is coming from either making the consumer buy on unsuccessful search, or on paying a higher price, or by doing more search, or some combination of these also. So again, a quick word about allocative efficiency. So if we had any contract that says that if the product doesn't match, the consumer can get a refund of S, right? That contract would achieve allocative efficiency. And furthermore, if the price is 0, then all the surplus sits with the consumer. So this is here, S, okay? And in this case, I've chosen the case of S being negative. But in our model, the refund actually may be greater than S when it's there. So this implies worse allocative efficiencies. Again, I don't think it's like super surprising, but good to see that you're getting that returns are causing the return policies too liberal in the sense that it is hurting allocative efficiency. Under search, if there was no search and we saw that contract, allocative efficiency was sort of perfect. But here with search, the return policy is hurting this, who gets to keep the product in the end, and the consumers have to keep it sometimes even when they don't like it, while in the contract, while without search, that was not happening. This is okay. So let me take a few 5 minutes to talk about a couple of extensions.
You have about 7 minutes, just so you know. We started.
Okay, yeah. All right, thanks. So I might not need 7 minutes now, but that's fine. So optimal informativeness of search. What if the firm could set this delta? What would it set it at? So if the salvage value is higher than the consumer salvage value, and then the firm charges the highest price, right, and allows the product return without any fee, and basically this delta doesn't really matter, right, because some consumers buy without search because they can just return for free. If this S is less than W, the salvage value is less than salvage value of the consumer, then the firm charges a low price and does not allow returns, and also sets delta low enough that the consumer buys without search, right? So the firm, if it can fully control, sort of unrestricted, the search informativeness, it wants to make search not at all informative or bad enough that the consumers don't end up searching. However, suppose one can imagine that some information always exists out there, right? You cannot make search completely uninformative. So then the firm actually can have the incentive to optimally increase informativeness. So just to illustrate that, and this is a weird plot with lots of cases under the different values of delta and return and not return, this and that. But just look at this dark black line, which is sort of the envelope of these. And suppose that the minimum delta that can be set is at 0.6, right? Then actually the firm wants to make the search more and more informative in this case, and induce a case where search is done with purchase, where purchase is done even if a match is found or if the search is inconclusive, along with a return fee. So in this case, right, so unrestricted delta, you would go all the way here and say, look, I'm not going to allow you to return, and I'm going to give you a very low price, and that's our deal, and you don't search. But here they say that, look, you search and you buy it, even if your search tells you nothing, but you can return it if it ends up that it didn't match you. So that's one, right? Looking at this informativeness. And finally, one last thing about return policy complexity, where up until now, this parameter theta was either 0 or 1. And now where 0 meant no search, 1 no return, 1 meant return. Now let's say we make this flexible between any value between 0 and 1. Right? And this, we interpret this as complexity. So the return policies can be of different complexity. Like, you say that, look, to return, you need the receipt and you need the original packaging and you need the product should be almost like new, and return it within 30 days and drop it off at this particular location. We're not going to pick it up from you, and you cannot mail it or whatever, right? So the more these clauses you add, the more complex the return policy becomes. And so to model complexity, we allow this theta between 0 and 1. And the way to interpret it again, it is that with probability 1 minus theta, something happens, the policy is more and more complex that the consumer just can't return, right? It's like something random happens. It does happen to me. I wanted to return something, but then I lost the 30-day thing, even though the thing was packaged and ready, sitting to be returned, but I had to drop it off at the UPS location, this Amazon return. Just couldn't find the time to do that, or like lost track of time, or those things are, I didn't have the original packaging anymore. In fact, I had to once keep a laptop because I threw away the original packaging. It started malfunctioning, or not really malfunctioning, I just didn't like it. And they're like, you can't return it anymore because you don't have the original packaging. Right? So something random happened. I just decided to throw it too early. I'm like, damn, I can't return it right now. So a smaller theta has more complexity. And again, to remind you, the way theta enters into the consumer's evaluation is this, right? So earlier it was you're either here or here, and now you're somewhere in between with this random theta. So what we find, I think, is very interesting, which is that the firm actually finds it, the firm can set the return fee and the complexity, and the firm finds it optimal to vary this complexity in the optimal way. But whatever is the optimal complexity, the optimal return fee is always 0. And I think that's, again, explains a lot of return contracts where almost everybody is saying, oh, free returns, right? But then when you read the policy is pretty complicated. You've got to do blah, blah, blah things to be, and so we are able to show that, yes, that's actually optimal for the firm if they could change the complexity of the policy. So I thought that's interesting. So conclusions, I'm finished now. The return policy helps the firm to appropriate some of the surplus that the consumers get from searching. Right? So it looks like something good for the consumer, or you can return, but actually it's not so good for the consumer. And the optimal return policy is too liberal, as I showed you, compared to that which obtains efficient allocation. And with returns, consumers may buy an unsuccessful search or pay a higher price or do more search. That's how the firm is really using it. Then the firm can set the price and return policy to induce different observed behavior. So we saw that, yes, we got the Zappos one, we got the Warby Parker, we got partial return with which is what most retailers follow. We got the Dollar General case of no returns whatsoever and without search. So no search and no returns. And finally, one result I just talked about, that the firm can optimally set the complexity of the return policy. That is, how many of these special clauses should be included, such that that while you always give a full return refund. So you can make the policy more and more complicated, but keep the return refund 0, and that turns out to be optimal for the firm in this model. So that's it. Thank you very much. Time.
Thank you for a great presentation. As always, feel free to start asking questions.
Yeah, and again, I would really welcome any feedback. This is literally done in the last, I would say, 4 weeks or so. So it's pretty early, and we're ready to sort of change this in any way and take it in many different directions. Yes. So sorry.
So I think this is just me being slow and tired, but the complexity result, the optimality is weak optimality. I mean, it's indifferent between doing it through complexity or prices, or it's strictly optimal to do it through
It's actually
complexity?
strictly optimal.
So can you just briefly talk me through that? So I'm sorry,
Yeah,
it was
absolutely.
just me being
No,
slow.
makes sense. I went right through that. So basically, and I think that this also depends on the model, right? But here, so think of think of a price and return fee pair, P and gamma, right? Given this price and return fee, the firm would want that the consumer doesn't return, right?
I see.
And so it wants to reduce that theta, or actually, yeah, keep reducing the theta, right? As for any P and gamma, it wants to keep reducing the theta. But now to make the prior such that the consumer still buys.
For the consumer, it's sort of similar whether it's a fee or complexity, but for the firm, it strictly prefers not to have the thing returned.
Right.
That's the
and that's where this is coming from. Yeah.
I see. Cool. That was very clear. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So could I just sort of harp on the same thing again? I mean, it seems like there's a lot of instruments to play with, like refund, complexity,
Mm-hmm.
and usually having lots of instruments to play with can be very helpful when there's a lot of heterogeneity. And so there might be a lot of mileage from thinking about ex-ante heterogeneous consumers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I know it's very hand wavy, but
no, it makes sense. Yeah. Yeah, and really what we want to do is like, okay, this is sort of a first exploration. Let's start with something, pretty simple. Could take it into many different directions, of course. And this seems like a valuable one.
I mean, it seems like a natural one, again, just for the application, that there are consumers who are likely to come in with different expectations about how likely it's going to be a match, or with different search costs, or I mean, there's a bunch of different ways to think about what that heterogeneity might mean. Right.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Sure. That was cool. Thank you. Thanks. This was clear and interesting. Enjoyed it.
Thank you.
A different heterogeneity question. So a lot of times the return policy is set for a website or for a company, but products vary quite a bit across what they're selling. Is there a way of reinterpreting some of these results or adapting some of them to, like Zappos sells shoes. So a lot of their products are very, very similar in how they behave, but Amazon sells a wide variety. So some of these websites go with blanket policies, others go with specific. Something along these lines would also, I think, be an interesting question.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the answer from the model, if we stick to the model, it'll be like, you look at your category and look at the salvage value and whatever the queue is and all that, and that'll determine, right, within category, and it can be different for different categories. And it's interesting, I agree that when does a firm want to have different policies versus when does it want to have, like LLB, I guess, has the same policy, whatever you want to buy, right? That includes shoes, and I guess that includes some sort of glasses, but maybe not numbered glasses, but some glasses. So yeah, I mean, one can think of some simple explanations, of course, that if they're very different and it's not too difficult, then you should have different policies. That's probably optimal, right? I mean, obviously, but then when do you want to switch to one? I think there's a lot of behavioral elements also that come in there, that consumers, they're like, oh, I always buy from LLB because I can just return it. While with Amazon, I really don't know, which actually I face that problem sometimes. I'm not a big person to like buy and return all the time, but I would want the return option to be open. And I'm like, oh, everything is so different now in terms of how you can return it and what refund it'll be.
So I think that behavioral aspect is another natural consideration that could be pushed much harder. So here, people are kind of, it's how in economics we work, but everybody is guessing right their likelihood that they're going to find the match. Again,
Right.
you could think that they're guessing that wrong on average, or
Yeah.
or that different people have different guesses, and that's likely to have implications for what kind of tools you want to use.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. I mean, actually, that is one of the reasons I like that complexity result, because the return fee is always 0, right?
Yeah.
And so consumer like, oh yeah, the return, I can just return it for free. When actually you look into the policy and later you realize, I mean, I'm here obviously we're also guessing that is also correctly guessed, but still, if you give me some leeway, it's kind of like the action is on the parameter the firm, the consumer is less likely to focus on, and the return fee is always 0, which looks so good.
I mean, I think that the nice thing there is, you might think complexity is about confusing. So I mean, I think a nice feature is that, complexity often you might think about as taking advantage of consumers or confusing them or something like that, or exploiting some behavioral tendency. Mm-hmm. And here actually, there's nothing like that at all. So I mean, in a sense, there's something very pretty about that as well, is that you're kind of able to get something like this even without this sort of behavioral component, because it's sort of natural to think that I mean
ex ante, that's what I thought, that all this complexity is just to confuse people, right? But
exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
So that's why I was happy to see this result, that it works out.
Well, and I mean, and of course, it's going to be exacerbated if people have a different impression of theta than is the reality. Right. So I mean, that's one aspect of behavioralism, is if I'm, the true theta is what the firm is characterizing, but people are over optimistic about their ability to keep receipts, or
right,
or the box, or what, whatever it is that you need to keep.
Yeah.
I wanted to add something. Oh, sorry.
No, in fact, even if people are pessimistic, the firm still might want to use it in your model.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I just wanted to add something very obvious, right? That the return policy can also be a signal of how much you can trust the company. If they're not offering it. So adding on to this idea of the behavioral kind of consumer.
Right. So there are a few. There are
as a signal of quality. Yeah.
As a signal of quality, like they're not offering your return, they're probably
right. So Sridhar Murthy and Kannan Srinivasan, they have a paper on return, basically money back guarantees as a signal to really return policy, right? Yeah. So I mean that is like, obviously you can only offer returns if you know they won't happen, kind of thing. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of literature on return policies. I'm just surprised that sort of nobody's connected it to search directly, except that one paper that I told you about.
There are a few in the chat, but yeah, they have kind of a different approach, but there are a few. I think that people.
Okay. Oh, I didn't monitor the chat. I should have.
I can send you the log after for anything that's
been. Yes, please. Yeah. I really, I mean, I'm kind of still not able to fully believe that I'm like this something that must exist. It's such a natural, I don't know, combination to consider. So yeah, I would really like to see what people have pointed me to, what literature.
Okay. So kind of a different extension type question. If you were to move from a monopoly to a duopoly, have you thought?
Yeah.
I mean, so I wouldn't even say part of this project, right? Because
what
you've got here is enough, and it's more about like maybe making it more robust or anything like that. But it would be interesting then to think if you could get almost some reversals if there's tighter.
Yeah, I think that I'll go back to Heskey's point that this model has a lot of instruments, and when I try to think of competition, like which one will be impacted most, because the firm is setting a lot of things, price, return policy, and the return fee, basically. I have to say my thoughts on that are not clear. I was trying to think about that yesterday, and I don't think I have something very smart to say there. But it's definitely something that's very natural to consider, right? So there's a monopolist. What if there's competition? What happens? It's a very valid and good question. I just frankly haven't had the time to explore it or even think about it very deeply, and I just don't want to like say something here. Waste of it. Yeah.
Yeah, I was also trying to track the intuition through, right? Like, because some of your cases,
Yeah.
you get, like the way the model's set up, once you added competition, you might have some very reversed statements that, like,
Yeah,
depending on how you introduced it.
it can absolutely happen. Yeah, yeah.
I mean,
But I think that just needs a, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, the sort of richness that, I mean, there's also choices to make. Like, does search tell you about both firms, about only one at a time?
Yeah,
There's
right.
like a whole host of kind of
Yeah,
modeling
yeah,
choices that you need to go through as well.
right. In some sense, and I feel that I agree with the point that coming back to this model, that there's a lot of instruments, but in some sense, I didn't know what to take out. Like there has to be a prior, there has to be a price, and there has to be a return fee. And that's what is there in the main model. There's the informativeness, which I think can be taken out and will reduce some of the outcomes. I still have to think about, what is the big disadvantage of not having a failed search. So thanks, Sandra, for that question. I'm still a little bit not clear on that if I take it out, what all will just not happen. I mean, yeah, we know some outcomes won't happen, and they happen in reality. So therefore, it might be reason more from a like whether you're writing a paper in econ or management or marketing, whether to keep it or not, right? But at a fundamental level, I think it plays a smaller role.
I think I try to keep track of delta is the.
Yes.
I think it always appears in such a way that you can divide C by delta and basically have one parameter. Except for you did some comparative statics with delta, but I suppose you could do similar with like kind of inverse of C.
Yeah. I wouldn't. I mean, I actually didn't notice that, but I was thinking of it often as C by delta or delta by C, that ratio. So, I mean, if that is true, that's a very acute observation.
I don't know.
Go back and let me get back to sort of the everything, the full analysis.
I think at least when I paid attention, the inequalities that included delta had C on the other side, or there was a ratio. So it was basically always a ratio of the two that met.
But I mean, I thought you had an outcome where people do search and do use refunds.
Yeah.
So for that, you have to have the indeterminate outcome of search to arise.
Right.
Like there's no getting.
Right.
There's no getting around that.
That's the main outcome that will be gone, right? And
that will be gone.
But that is also, I think, one of the widest observed outcomes. That I tried to do some search, I didn't find anything. Let me just get it because I do have a return policy. So, and that's I mean, if we lose that, so then I don't know. I mean, you lose an outcome, as I said. We will lose certain outcomes, but some of the higher level insights are still there, right?
But those outcomes will also affect, what optimal prices will look like and things like that. So and potentially profitability.
Yeah. I mean, I don't want to undersell my model choices either. So
I am gonna cut the recording here.